Welcome to Beyond the Art, the podcast that brings you into the heart of Native creativity, one story at a time. I'm your host, Cray Beaumont Flynn. In today's episode, we sit down with extraordinary Neal Ambrose-Smith, a multidisciplinary artist whose work fearlessly blends humor, identity, and contemporary politics. Neal takes us on a journey through the intersection of pop culture, resistance, and indigenous sovereignty, with wit, wisdom, and a whole lot of heart. This episode is made possible with a generous support from the Denver Art Museum. We're honored to partner with Denver Art Museum, a vital institution in advancing Native voices and showcasing indigenous excellence in the arts. So let's step beyond the art with Neal Ambrose-Smith. Welcome to the show, Neal.
Thank you, Cray.
So we're just going to jump right into it, Neal. How has your heritage influenced your artistic journey?
Culture is not something you can put aside and try to eliminate or something like that. A lot of times it just creeps out. And some people will look at my work and say, well, it doesn't look native. It doesn't look Indian to me. And but when I look at my work, I definitely see the influence of my culture. Mm-hmm. And certainly a lot of other natives do too. You know, Indian humor is a big thing, and it's a medicine that we share, and we love to laugh. Like right now is a really good time to start laughing.
Yeah, exactly. After 4 outtakes and trying to get the show off the ground today.
That's right.
And
away we go.
Well, it's true. You know, what is Native American art? Or, I've heard that from multiple indigenous Native American artists that they've been told it's not Indian enough.
Right.
Well, I created, so it is. It's part of my DNA. It came from my hand, my brains, and creation. So,
yeah. I think when you look at the homogenized art world in New York, where everybody came in from other parts of the planet, fleeing, war, genocide, whatever, and a lot of those cultures had to be sort of suppressed or put to the side, especially language, right. And so there was a lot of homogenizing and. But talking about politics and talking about greater culture was always something that happened. But a lot of times people really didn't talk about their individual culture specifically. Mm-hmm. But there are elements of it there for sure. But I think our community has a lot more of our culture intact, and we're able to let it flow through and into the work. But we haven't really had the contemporary stage like other cultures had. And, the Black American culture has had a long time to work on their influence in their work and their presentation and how they interact in this country. And in fact, they've had a president. That's something that we haven't done yet, right?
Right.
And so our journey is kind of short. Our art history, even though it goes back probably 40,000 years on this continent, on this dirt, our contemporary journey of art, especially within mainstream, is very short. It's only been in the last 50 years, basically. And going back to, if you go back 50 years, it's like tempera paints and watercolors was our foundation, and there was no art history.
Right.
Like when my mother started, she always knew she wanted to be an artist, that she was an artist, but she never had formal art history. And that's a step behind most other cultures and other people in mainstream arts, where they're raised with art history, especially like in New York City, where you can go to museums, schools go to museums, and you see contemporary work all the time. We weren't afforded that luxury.
Right.
My mom grew up in a cabin with no electricity, and like 3 families. So a very different place that we're in today than we were like 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And you're descended from two tribal nations, the Confederate, is it Salish? Salish?
Salish.
Salish.
Yeah, the Confederated Kootenai and Salish tribe in Montana, but I'm actually Métis, Cree, and Shoban or Shoshone Bannock. So the Mendel's idea of spreading the gene pool around, which is a very important thing. We've been doing that for a long time. And so I have like 5 or 6 tribes in me.
Same here, brother. Same here.
Right.
All shaken up.
Right. And we're always interested in, the other side of the fence, the grass is greener somewhere else. I mean, that's just natural. That's natural order of things.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're a multidisciplinary pop artist, printmaker, sculptor, and professor. So how do you work across painting, sculpting, printmaking? What drew you to these different mediums, and how do they complement each other in your creative process?
So Native American art history, again, doesn't follow the same patterns as the European canon, where when you go to college, you're supposed to stay in your lane. You do this. You're either a printmaker or you're a painter. And even though a lot of us forget about artists like Rauschenberg or Picasso, for instance, who sculpted, painted, did light art, photography, printmaking. There was probably not much that Picasso didn't do.
Right.
But again, we're still taught the European canon of you have to stay in your lane. And because we didn't come from, our community didn't come from a standardization of art history, we didn't have any lanes. We didn't even have to change lanes. There was no lanes. Everything is connected. And it goes back to there's no native language on this continent that has a word for art. Right now, there's 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States alone. This is not Canada, which those are First Nations people. In the United States, we're Native American, and then of course south of the border, which is a political border, because we all have relations throughout this entire piece of dirt. But no language here has a word for art. It's holistic view of life. All things are connected. Where art is part of our life, and it goes into everything that we do. And so
it's part of our language and our storytelling and, every
absolutely.
other aspect.
Yeah. So, that the idea of multidisciplinary, it's kind of a new word as well. And I think it's interesting that, that people find it interesting, that we do so many different things. Not all of us, bounce around and mix stuff up, but a lot of us do. And I really learned about it when I was working in my master's. I finished off my bachelor's like the normal time, like people were supposed to do back in the 80s. And then I really didn't go back to get my master's until I was like 40. And that's when I learned about these rules, because I didn't really follow any rules when I got my bachelor's. I went to UNC in Northern Colorado, and they were pretty lax. It was pretty, it was a pretty groovy ride in that regard. And I did a lot of crazy stuff, but like I went to school, UNM for printmaking, because you had to pick a lane. But I would like draw and paint on the prints, and people were up in arms about that. They're like, "Why? That's not a print." I'm like, "Well, whatever. It's art. It's whatever you want it to be. You could call it whatever you want to call it. I'm just making art, And I think part of that too is watching my mom for years. I was the first student because I was the child. And so I was hanging out in the studio and watching her draw and do stuff. And then I would like went to classes with her when she was working on her undergrad because we couldn't afford, daycare, that kind of thing. So I attended a lot of classes as a child, and she was doing the same thing. Started printing at Tamarind. Marjorie Devon brought her in 76, 77, something like that. And Jean went in to draw back on one of the prints, and like everybody rushed in and said, wait, what are you doing? And she's like, well, I got to fix this. I have to fix this composition. And I get that. I do the same thing, like if it's not right, you have to fix it. And so, however you fix it is however you fix it. It could be a can of spray paint. It could be a pencil, whatever, you might have to drive over it, with a scooter to fix the darn thing. But, the composition, needs to be right.
Mm-hmm. And it tells you when it's right. It kind of speaks to you.
That's true. And a lot of people don't pay attention. They don't listen to what the artwork has to say. I think it was Louise Bourgeois was talking about like the canvas one time, and the idea of you have to make a mark to initiate, because there's nothing there. It's just an empty space. So you start the conversation. And then from that point on, you start to create the dialogue, and you listen, and then you respond, and you listen and respond. And that's how the composition evolves. And it's a very organic, very natural. And again, this goes back to the culture, where I'm used to that. I was raised that way, to listen and respond. It's like it's like going hiking. People go hiking, and sometimes people just describe it as like, oh well, we're hiking. I'm going out in the woods, and I'm smelling the pine. But there's a conversation if you're listening and then responding. There's always a conversation.
Correct. Very, very true. Well, as a professor at the Institute of American Indian Art, how does teaching inform your work, and what do you hope to impart the next generation of Indigenous Native artists?
Well, I stopped teaching a couple years ago.
Oh, you did? Oh.
I did, but
bad notes.
No, it's fine. I started working for my mom full time in her studio because it just got to the point where there were so many jobs and so many things happening that I needed to be there. And but I will say that teaching is incredible, and that everybody should do it. Many famous artists taught anyway,
right?
So it's not strange. It's a good job. It's a foundation. Like you get insurance,
keeps you fed,
take care of your family, and it pays the bills.
Yep.
So you can keep working. Fritz Schilder once told my mom that always make sure that you have canvas and paint. Never go without, because when there's no money, you can't go buy it. So make sure you have it so that you can keep painting, because there's always the next painting that has to happen. And so having that full-time job is a great gig because it affords that. The other thing I'll say about teaching is that students inform our work all the time, whether they're critiquing our work or coming to our studio, which usually doesn't happen. Like I never brought students really into my studio, and we never really talked about my work in that way. But the relationship and the dialogue in the studio space, in the classroom, is absolutely invaluable. We learn so much from the freedom that they come in with, because a lot of us, the older we get, the more rules are placed upon us.
True. And
it makes it harder for us to see beyond that, and we can get stuck. And students a lot of times have a much more free spirit. They still have that light of the child that wants to explore and learn new things. And so that's a gift that is wonderful that we can glean. The other thing is a lot of times they come up with really good ideas, and they don't mind giving them to you. Because when I go visit my friends in their studios, don't look over here, because I don't want you to steal these ideas, but you could look over here. But students, they're just like, whatever. if you like it, that's great. Take it. Take those ideas. And so,
Right.
what a wonderful space to be in, because it's a quid pro quo. It's a very good trade.
Right.
That kind of dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think also it helps you expand your thought and, I guess, self-reflect on your artistry, because obviously you see something, your brain and hands are interacting as you create, and then if you have those students or those that you're collaborating or collectively in that environment see something else.
Right. Yeah. And I'll say that like drawing and printmaking are two areas that are great to teach, because if you get good at it, you can learn to make your own work as well as doing a demonstration, which is invaluable for the student, because then they can see they're not just looking at tires and a steering wheel and a stick shift, and then you say, well, eventually you're going to learn how to drive a car.
Right.
Like it puts it all into perspective, right? It gives them the magic of the moment where they see it really happen in front of them, and they're a part of it. They get to experience it. I learned how to do that. It took me about a year to be able to turn a demonstration into something that I could use for a show or something like that. And it was great. It was great for the students. And then, students love to trade. So, they get something out of it too, as well.
Well, you mentioned, obviously you were heavily influenced by your mom, Jean, when she started and became a very prolific artist. How does those inspirations manifest in your work?
Sometimes the best work comes from art history. And that could be next door, that could be from your parent, or it could be out of a book or going to a museum. And I will say that the more I study my work and look at it and then end up working on my mother's archives, I see where it came from. Like, and I love the moments of like thinking that I discovered something really incredible, like, ooh, this is going to be good, like, oh. And then later I see that she already did it, which is really fabulous. And so that was my first introduction to art history, was studying her work as I was growing up and helping her in the studio and working with her work. And so I can say that that I can't make anything that is not influenced by her work. But I'm like a sea urchin. I'm like exposed to everything, and so anything that comes my way, and passes by, there's a potential of going into my work somehow. It all filters through at some level.
True. Yeah, very true.
Yeah. But she did tell me. She said, "Look, if you see anything you like, just steal it."
Repurpose.
Yeah.
Well, you can't reinvent the wheel, I guess,
No, that's true. And once you recognize that, there are some artists that say, "Oh no, I've done this. I do my own thing," and that's really sad, because everything comes from something. Nothing comes from a vacuum. Yeah. Nobody creates anything from within themselves. You're not touched by something outside. You are touched by others. We're affected by all around. I mean, again, it's all things are connected. Chief Seattle, 1854. We are part of the bugs. We're part of wood tick. We're part of the air other people breathe.
True, very true. Well, your art often reflects on contemporary issues, from politics to social justice. How do you balance personal expression with addressing these broader, very complex topics, especially in today's atmosphere? It's ever so changing, and I think a lot of people are looking at it as doom and gloom. How do you kind of incorporate more of a lighter, inspirational aspect to it?
It's almost like a nonstop commercial. It's like, now how much would you pay? But wait, there's more. If you circle the little elephant on the reader's card, we'll send you this free gift. A bamboo steamer. Oh, I keep waiting. I check the mailbox every day, but I don't see my bamboo steamer. And I've never gotten a Trump check. I just don't know. I mean, I'm waiting.
You have it?
I balance it with humor, obviously. And my mom uses humor as well. But a lot of times she will leave the stick pointed for impact. But I generally don't do that in my work. I tend to either be inclusive of the dialogue and reflect it back on myself and make fun of myself, and use myself as the guinea pig instead of pointing fingers. A lot of people don't like to be hit in the face, with reality or the truth or facts, that kind of thing. But they love to laugh. Lots of people love to laugh, and so if I can get them on board with me on this journey to at least learn something with me, then maybe we can have more dialogue later. I think there's more potential for that, but again, I'm only thinking about one person at a time.
Right.
And I don't, I don't really have any aspirations of hitting thousands and thousands of people moving through the museum. That would be great, but I think, one at a time.
One at a time. Well, tell us a little bit about your recent exhibition, Painting the Talking Heads and Exploring Indigenous Art Within the Colonial Borders. I mean, expand on this concept and what you hope viewers will take away from it.
Well, it's putting all the strange iconography together. I really love the design from the 50s and a lot of the line art. There was this guy, Sean, in Portland that put together these magazines called Crap Hound. And there's there's 12 or 13 volumes. And it's just a collection of clip art that he's found and collected and then published. But he arranged them in such a way that they were these fabulous art pieces. Every page, you turn a page and it's all like scissors. But they're beautifully laid out. But I love the drawings and what's really fascinating to me, I mean, yeah, it's fascinating, is that there's no people of color generally, it alludes to maybe African-American people a little bit. Once in a while you'll see maybe, kinky hair or something, but
right.
Usually it's just, it's My Three Sons or, that kind of thing. And the dad with the pipe. Right. And, but I love that drawing and I love those carefree, white people who are just going about their day like it's no big deal. Everything's great. And I'm like, wait a minute. And so I like to take that stuff and slam it into my work and then use it as, they're just toolbox iconography, but they also become transforming clip art, in other words, into pictographs or something like that. It's another form of mark making, and I think largely that's really something that really turns me on a lot when I'm drawing and painting.
So most recently, you worked with your mom on a collaboration, Indigenous Identities, correct? Yes,
it's a big show that opened at Rutgers University, Zimmerling Museum, and a fabulous show. And it was, I'm not going to say it was an easy job because there was a lot of artists. There's over 100 works and there's 90 some artists in there, and but we didn't have a hard time finding contemporary native work that had identity in it. You know what I mean? It's really great. Even as clean or sterile as some work may be, it still has some connection to culture. And there's always content.
Correct.
They always
Yeah.
have content. There's always a story. There's a reason behind it, and I love that about the work, and I love the idea that it's a shared human experience instead of just being a shelf hanging on the wall.
Right.
and and not to call out any artist, but or blocks or that kind of thing. Like it has meaning, it has content, and that's great. I love that. I was raised with that. That's part of who I am, and I really have a hard time with art that claims to be devoid of culture or content, or like they've just erased all that out. It's kind of like changing the name of a mountain or the name of a body of water or something like that. Just like we're just going to erase any kind of that kind of thing. I think it's better when the whole story is there. There's nobody has a clean history. History is very, very dirty, and humans are still learning how to get along. And I think we need to know, we need to hear about it, and we need to recognize and at least understand from where we come. There's no way to know where you're going unless you know from where you've come. And I think this show really has a lot of that, because I had a conversation with somebody a couple months ago, and they were from like a museum or something, and they some institution, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, I thought there was only like 5 tribes," and so it's clear that we're still working on our history and trying to disseminate information that's correct and valid. It's hard when you don't win the war. Right. It's hard when you're the loser and you're on the underside of oppression to get the facts out, because you're not afforded that possibility. I mean, look, Kendrick Lamar, like talking about the revolution is televised. I mean, that's so brilliant. And I haven't heard anybody talk about that in the news. They talk about all these other things, but I'm like, that's Black history. That's 1971. That is an incredible jazz album. That's so brilliant that he brought that in, and all he had to do was just say that, and that was it. I mean, it was so perfect.
And it made people think. It's like, what does he mean? Right.
What do you mean revolution? They're like, oh, like better circle the wagons, because the minorities are getting restless, kind of thing. And that's not it at all. That's not it. I mean, the original piece, it was so laden with like cultural references, talking about Nixon and Bullwinkle and commercials and commercialism. And he brought all that right there for all of us to bear witness. It was so brilliant.
Yeah. I'm sure there's people still thinking or questioning, what was that?
Right.
And not really getting the facts correct, or the undertone of the story he was trying to express.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the show is very generational. The show features artists spanning several generations. How do you see your work in a dialogue with both emerging and very established Indigenous and Native artists?
Well, at some level, we're probably related. The first thing that we do as Native peoples is we're always like, where are you from? What piece of dirt are you from? Yeah. And where are you connected? And then we start thinking about relations, like, oh, I got a cousin. I have an uncle or something. Right. And then we're bonded, and then suddenly we're like kinfolk kind of thing. And I feel that in this show. Like, I know all of those people. The only person I haven't met in the show was Jeffrey Verege, and he passed before I was afforded that opportunity. And but everybody else, they've all been friends or relations, and back in the 70s, a lot of those artists, the older ones, would camp out in our yard for Indian market. So they'd be out there, working on stuff, and they were always like moving in and out of the house and that kind of thing. So I grew up with a lot of those older artists, and a lot of the younger artists. Jean was the internet in the early 80s, because she would fly coast to coast. She would go to San Francisco and meet George Longfish and like activate something. And then she'd fly to New York and hang out with Pete Jemison and activate something. And so she was networking. And the only way you can do that is with a payphone and with an airline ticket. And that's what she did, curating and connecting Native artists. And then, of course, along the way, lecturing and meeting Native artists. Like, is there any Native artists in the, who's Native American in here?
Right.
That kind of thing. And what tribe are you? And then like bringing them into the fold. And a lot of those artists, Jean spent time with Jeffrey Gibson, Joe Fedderson. Many, many artists were deeply affected and touched by her individually. She made everybody feel important, and they are important. I mean, this show is evidence of that, that the fact that they're here is a survival story. The fact that any of us can like raise our voice and have something to say is amazing. It's incredible. And to witness all of them in one space, it's really, really fabulous.
Well, may her torch and the many others that have left us, may they continue on and forward, because they've taught us a lot and gave us an essence that was much needed. So
excellent.
Well, as an Indigenous artist with work in institutions like the Smithsonian and international collections, what challenges have you faced gaining recognition, and how do you see the industry evolving? A lot of people say it's our time. Jeffrey Gibson was in Venice most recently, and Jean and the expeditions and what she did throughout her journey.
The Whitney show, the retrospective. Yeah. There was a turning point, and, unfortunate events created an environment of change. George Floyd is one, and Standing Rock is another, of just two really important moments where the art world started looking for the new baby, and we were it. They look no further. I mean, and we were ready because of all the work that Pete Jemison and Jean Quick to See Smith and George Longfish and many, many other Native artists have been doing over the years, teaching younger Natives and getting them, through school and getting them degrees, and then getting curators and getting writers and educators. We built up enough of a presence underneath that we could fulfill the need. It's like supply and demand.
Right.
We had the supply. We were just waiting for the demand, and the demand came, and we answered it. And I mean, we're like checking off all the boxes. Raven Chacon, and Jeffrey Gibson. Like all these things that we're doing are really, really amazing, but it's because of all the groundwork that was laid. And so I don't know how long it's going to last, but I think we're going to stay with it as long as we can and see where it goes. But at least there's an awareness that our work is contemporary. And this goes back to your other question about like the difficulty, and that is, we're pigeonholed.
Right.
Feathers and, headdresses and, war hoops and, pots or something.
Yeah.
And rugs that go on the floor that you walk on, we don't make art. We just make crafts. We're craftspeople, and largely we're savage. We're a little behind, and that's not true. We're very, very contemporary. In fact, our work, has been, contemporary for thousands of years. You look at Salish, especially coastal Salish design, that form line design. Oh my gosh, that is so contemporary, and that hasn't changed. It's incredible, and it's stolen all the time. Like, I'll be driving down the road and I'll see taillights in some car, and I'll be like, that's an eagle. or that's a raven. I mean, I can see the form line design impact on commercial design, industrial design, and that's huge. But nobody talks about it. I mean, nobody. Again, a lot of people don't like to say where they stole their idea from, and I understand that. But I'll be the first one to tell you where I stole it.
Well, I think also, we have a seat at the table now. It's
That's
about
true.
self-representation, that we're telling our story from us firsthand, not two or three. Someone's telling our story. It's, I think, longevity and sustainability. We've waited long enough, and I don't think it's just 15 minutes because
Right.
we have the luxury of being in this time and place now because of social media, television, film, music, and fashion, all these various mediums that we've kind of burst out to, and we're not being looked at as the street vendor Indian selling arts and crafts,
Sure.
that we have a little bit more in-depth artistry that is there and that is hopefully being recognized.
Well, you could look at the 15 minutes like, like how DJ says he's going to end the war in 24 hours. And then Saturday Night Live is like, well, he didn't say which 24 hours, kind of thing. And he's like, not in a row, kind of thing. And that's true with Andy Warhol's 15 minutes. Like, we haven't spent our 15 minutes yet. We're just getting ready. Or, or maybe 1 minute is an eon. And so we have at least 14 more eons to go, kind of thing. I mean, but I love the idea and I love the relationship.
Well, your work often carries a sense of humor, as it's been displayed, just chatting with you, and irony. When addressing serious issues, how do you use humor as a tool in your art? Well,
I use it as a mode to bring people together rather than to be divisive. I'm not interested in divisiveness. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work for me, and it's very against the grain in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Some artists are very good at it. It's just not my thing. I prefer to laugh, actually. I laugh a lot. I study a lot of comedians, and over the years, and how they put things together, and because it's especially the really good comedians will talk about life things and isolate something, and usually it's either about themselves or around them, and instead of pointing the finger and like calling something out in that regard. And those pretty brilliant, Steve Martin, very brilliant comedian, Jerry Seinfeld, just the daily ordinary, the shower head or whatever, and I try to put that into my work. I try to use the same technology, as it were, and apply it in that way, because it's effective. It reaches more people in that way than it does other in any other way. But the bottom line is I only make things that entertain me, and I only do things that I want to do, and I really don't make stuff for your couch, regardless of the color of your couch. I can't. I won't. I'm not for hire. I do my own thing.
Well, I think humor also enables us to lean forward and listen to a very hot topic or a very hard topic to talk about, and just talking to people. But when there's a humor twist to it, I think people have a tendency to like, want to hear more because the tone that's being set up into it. So,
yeah, right. You set the stage and you get it ready, and then you hit them with the punchline.
Yeah, and they're like, huh? Like the recent, halftime show.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, what steps do you think need to be taken to further and amplify Native voices in the art world? And as you said, take that 15 minutes and make it just so long and sustainable for more generations to come?
We need to get more institutions involved. Rutgers, fabulous institution. National Gallery, fabulous. Whitney, incredible. And they're just doing incredible things. They're like out in front, and they're ready to like fall down the stairs, but they're doing great. Museum of Modern Art, they need to catch up. They're a little antiquated in that regard. And so I think more of that. Mm-hmm.
Looking back on your career, Neal, what moments or accomplishments stand out to you as a particularly meaningful and that's embedded in yourself, and that you want to continue in developing as you continue this journey?
That's a tough one. Because I tend not to break things down in isolated. I mean, it's like asking the artist, oh, "What's your favorite painting?" It's the one I'm working on right now.
Yeah,
kind of thing. And I have to say, it's every day, and looking forward to the next project or the next thing, the next painting. In that regard, I just had a long talk with Laura Ortman in New Jersey, and we're going to collaborate on some stuff. Do some stuff together. And I'm excited. I'm excited for that.
Well, that kind of gives me a good segue into my next question. That was, what's new? Are there any new projects or directions you're excited to explore in your work?
Right now, I'm doing a lot of self-portraits. I haven't painted in a while, and because I've been working with my mom every day, and in her last month, trying to just get things squared away so that I can finish her projects, because she's got a lot of projects. She's a very busy girl, and so I have a lot of her things that I am working on and will continue to work on to see through. And then so I've been taking pictures of myself because it's easy. And so I call myself Bad Coyote, and I'll dress up with a headdress or something from China. It's authentic.
Yeah.
And because it says China right on it. And I'll put on like some Maybelline vampire red or something, and as war paint something, and then you could see this camera behind me. It's an 8x10, so I'm doing color reversal Polaroids basically. So I'm shooting straight onto photo paper, and then I'm burning out the black and white image and developing the color image, which is reversed. And it takes about, it's very technical. Photography is really, really technical, and it really kind of bends my brain because I have to concentrate on it. It's
right.
like I get composition. That's one thing that growing up with my mom, was like embedded in me. It's like part of our DNA. Like I have no trouble with that. And so, but the technical thing is really kind of can slow me down. But it takes about maybe 15,000 watt seconds of light, which is a lot of light, and it's because I'm trying to expose paper inside the camera instead of film, because film is a lot more light sensitive. That paper is not very light sensitive. But I get one-offs, so they're kind of like Polaroids.
Right.
So I've been shooting a lot of 8x10s, and I have a collection of Polaroid cameras too that I've been using and shooting. I do a lot of Polaroid shooting, and I write a lot of music. Writing music is something that I can do anywhere, and I really don't need a studio. I can just write music somewhere, which is great. I can do it on the plane. I can do it in my sleep. I wake up a lot with projects.
I was going to say, you do your sleep. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm always working. You know, I need that belt buckle that says TCB, and taking care of business. So
Got it. Well, all these Polaroids, are they part of a collective you want to build? Is it part of something you want to
I don't know.
create?
A lot of times, artists will do things and it just doesn't go anywhere. I mean, people don't discover it until after they're gone, or something.
I get that.
So I have no idea what's going to happen with them. I mean, I don't really have an outlet. Let's say I've been doing a lot of neon. That's easy for an outlet because I make these neon teepees and then I put a new statement inside them, and I can just drag that up to the gallery and show that. But yeah, I mean that's about what I'm doing right now.
What advice would you give to young Native artists who are navigating their way in today's art world?
Well, education is really, really important because it helps us with critical thought. IAIA is an excellent institution, but if you can get an education anywhere, there's lots of Indians teaching all over the United States. Wisconsin has some great schools. Yeah, you can reach out to me. I'm available, and many Native artists are available. And don't be afraid. Be fearless.
Do you have a favorite artist of all time?
John Quick to See Smith. I love
That's a given. It's first teacher. Why not?
I love many artists. I mean, from Philip Guston to Keith Haring to Philip Glass, Mimo Palladino. It's a long list. But yeah, I mean, I see a lot of John's work in my work for sure.
Well, the DNA's there, so
there's a lot of DNA in there. But yeah.
Well, one medium you haven't tried but you want to.
I don't know. I think they have to invent something. I mean,
you invent it.
Well, they, apps, right? Nobody has claimed an app as an art piece, and I made, or at least in as far as Google or Apple's vision, they don't have a section for art. There's a lot of artists that have created apps that do art things,
right?
And I have an app, that's on iPhone. That it's free and it's 100 artist ideas, but I did it as an art piece, because it's cheeky. Because I like to be cheeky, and so it's, 100 ideas for making art, and you could pick any one of them. It has a random thing. You shake the phone or you shake your watch, and something will come up and it'll say, sweep, and then it goes through this whole dialogue of like, well, clean your studio, because when you're cleaning your studio, you're thinking about other things. It helps you process your brain, and it's like drinking coffee. It's part of our cathartic introduction to the studio every day, kind of thing. Getting us ready. We have all these rituals. That's another one, ritual. I mean, they're all kind of. And they're fun, and they're rooted in art history, and some of them are some like dialogues between my mom and I.
That's fantastic. What's it called again? 100
artist ideas. It's 100 artist ideas. Yeah, and it's free.
Check it out. It's free, even better.
So I had to teach myself JavaScript, and because there was nobody when I did it. It was like 2016 or something like that. And I wanted to make an app, and so I couldn't find anybody in town, and so I started teaching myself JavaScript and like writing all this code and trying to get this thing to work. And then when I started looking at Apple and the rules that they have and the regulations that they have for like getting an app in there, it stopped me in my tracks, and so it took me another year to find somebody that was their job, was, working on apps for people and getting them published. And then it came to, he's like, well, what category? I'm like, art. And it's like, well, there's no art category. So it's in the educational category, which is fine. I'm okay with that.
So if you had to think of a dream exhibition space, what would it be?
I like cathedrals for lots of reasons. One is Catholicism. There's a relationship to almost every tribe with Catholicism because of the rituals, but also the idea that organized religion, when it landed on the United States back in the day, it exploded into 70,000 denominations. And like, who does that? Who can take a religion that has been so focused for thousands of years and then suddenly say, well, we like this, but we don't like that. And we like this and we don't like that kind of thing. And then it's a free for all, well, we'll do whatever we want kind of thing. So I love all those. I love the historical nature of Catholicism, of Christianity, and they're giant buildings because you make something is big and godlike,
right.
in that sense, supernatural, so that humans will believe. I love those spaces. They're beautiful, wonderful spaces, and it's built for congregating, which I'm all about. We need more benches in museums. We need more places for people to sit and congregate and live with the art. If you don't have art in your house, you're not living.
Yeah.
Unless you go to the museum every day.
True. And you can't just flash by art. You have to look and spend time and appreciate it and let it absorb, not just,
Sure.
That looks nice. That looks nice. With any type of art, I think, even fashion, film, every type of art, people, I don't think, appreciate it enough to let it really affect your senses.
Yes.
Or experience it.
That's true.
What's your go-to inspiration when you're stuck, when you have art cramps, writer's cramp, music cramps?
This is going to sound really, I don't get stuck. That's not one of my things. I was raised with, you don't get stuck. Like I was raised with the idea that that's an entitlement, that there are people out there that are afforded the ability to be bored, that they have that entitlement, but you don't have that. You have to go down with your boots on. You have to work every day. And so I haven't really, and that's largely like in fact, that's in my app. One of them is like stuck with your paintings, and I like go through this whole thing about like, that's crazy. You should, I got a zillion ideas. In fact, when I was, I taught classes at UNM before I started teaching at IIA, because, you do that as a graduate student. And those students would come in and they'd be like, I don't know what to do, kind of thing. Like, I don't have any ideas. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're in art school. Right. This is your dream. It's you made it here. And I know I'm totally off base with them because entitlement gets in the way of everything.
Right.
And so when I was teaching at IIA, the students would come in and they'd be like, look, I know you want to teach us something. You have something that important that you need to like share, but I'm here to make art. And so if you can just get out of my way, I'm going to make art and you just do you, kind of thing. And I was like, that's amazing. That's great. And I'm like, that's sure. I'll be here. I mean, you want to learn how to use the press? Right here. I'll show you how to set the pressure. You want to learn something about ink, color, whatever, art history. I'm available, but you make art, that kind of thing. That was amazing to me. That was an eye opener. And so, I mean, it's not every case, but right. I don't really have that. There's always something to do. I'm influenced by new tools. If I go to Dick Blick in New York, we used to go to Pearl Paint in New York City, which was unbelievable. But, or New York, the New York Central Art Supply. I love that store. That was one of my favorite stores down in Soho. Anyway, going to like an art supply store, like Dick Blick or something like that. There's like so many toys.
Yeah.
There's so much fun. And I spend thousands of dollars in that store because, you know, I have to stock up. Just like Fritz said, you know, you can't go without. And there's tons of inspiration. I remember one time I found acrylic spray paint in a pump bottle. And and it was like these little things, you know, you can like stick it in your bag, you know, they could carry it with you, you know, you have it, it's ready. And I mean, it doesn't really do much, but what it does, it's great. You know, it makes a spot and it can drip kind of thing. And it was fabulous. And so, I mean, something like that is really inspirational for me.
What are you most surprised about on your journey?
Well, I do have to say the contemporary politics have been quite surprising. And but then I have to backtrack and say, well, historically, we didn't hear a lot about this stuff. They're just being, their sense of entitlement is now forefront. And so they feel free to tell you that you're a minority and that you don't belong and that they're right and you're wrong. We should turn this into a rap. And, it's pretty shocking how forward it is, you know, and how more and more of these people are being more public about their true selves. I mean, I'm always my true self, but I guess they're not. Is the feeling that I'm getting? It's this understanding that, oh, they've been pretending this whole time, or I'm still trying to figure it out. But that's pretty shocking for me. Is that stuff, you know? It doesn't shock me so much anymore when somebody says, "Oh, I thought you guys were all dead," or "I didn't know there was more than one tribe," or "How come you don't wear feathers?" Or "I don't see your loincloth," you know. Well, my loincloth is underneath my pants.
Yeah.
And I left the feathers at home because it's contraband on the plane. You know, like that doesn't surprise me anymore. But the contemporary politics and the continuation of ridiculous wars is actually pretty shocking. When you compare it, I mean, there's always been ridiculous wars, but you know, those people back then, you know, like 300 years, like the Romans or something, you know, and the Mycenaeans or whatever, like that makes sense to me. You know, it's overland or whatever, you know, ridiculous stuff. They didn't have cell phones, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
And they certainly didn't have history books or, you know, educations that afforded that for most people.
So what can we expect to see from Neal Ambrose-Smith this year?
Oh,
I don't know.
I really don't know. I mean, you know, I've been staying away from social media for a while, and I try to catch up, you know, like on Instagram. But if you stop for a split second on anything that looks interesting, whatever that's related to comes up every other feed following that. And so whether you were interested in it or not doesn't matter. Like there's no control over that. And so it's like hitting me in the face with stuff I'm not interested in. You know, like something will scroll up and it's a dancing whale. And I'm like, dancing whale. And then, but I'm just trying to recognize it. Well, anyway, the algorithm already said, hey, he likes dancing whales. And so like I get dancing whales like every other feed. And I'm like, oh, I can't take this. And so I have to turn it off. And I'm like, I can't be a minority in this. Like lots of people have to be fed up with this. I would gladly pay to get rid of that nonsense because I want to catch up with a lot of other artists because that's a medium, that's a format, that's our smoke signals.
Correct.
For seeing who's doing what and where they are. I want to know, I want to catch up with Chanupa. I want to catch up with Marie Watt. I want to catch up with all these people, all my friends, see what they're doing. And then, you know, sort of like let them know what I'm doing kind of thing. And
or watch our show here.
Yeah, and watch the show, right?
They both appeared on their show, so
I don't know I don't know. I might go swimming.
Hey, there's a dancing wheel segue right there.
Right.
Well, Neal, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
I'm very gracious for this opportunity, and thank you so much, Cray.
Oh no, my pleasure. It's been a pure joy, my friend, pure joy. Thank you for joining us on Beyond the Art. A special thanks to our guest, Neal Ambrose-Smith, for sharing his powerful perspective, his humor, and his dedication to pushing boundaries through art. And our heartfelt gratitude goes to the Denver Art Museum for their continued support and sponsorship. Together, we're lifting Native voices and creating space for Indigenous creativity to thrive. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share. Follow us on Instagram for the latest updates and behind-the-scenes content. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep honoring the stories that shape our world.